Well, it's always a delight to have John Mittendorf with us. He works with Answers in Genesis, and he's kind of our resident creation apologist here at theDove. And we've been talking about the subject of Genesis and all the things that are in there. It's really a powerful book. And if you don't believe Genesis 1:1, then you're going to stumble your way through the rest of the Bible.
Well, that's exactly right, Perry. That Genesis 1:1 sets the tone for the rest of the Bible, because if you don't believe Genesis 1:1, then where else don't you believe the Bible? Or if Genesis 1:1 doesn't say what it means to say, then what else does the Bible mean to say? So is the rest of the Bible open for interpretation? You know, either it says what it means or it doesn't.
That's right. In the beginning, God created. Well, we're going to want to talk about the subject of, I guess, dating or time. What is a day according to Genesis? And I didn't realize how controversial this was, because a lot of pastors, a lot of people in ministry struggle with millions of years, thousands of years.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And and there's the gap theory, I guess.
The gap theory, the reconstruction theory, and I mean the framework hypothesis, and the day-age theory, and the list just goes on. Now let me start you off with one of my famous questions this morning. This one's easy. One's easy.
Usually doesn't have anything to do with creation.
What is a bigger issue in the church today? And you alluded to it this morning when you started off. Is it the evolution-creation debate, or is it the millions and billions of years, or is it the 24-hour day version of the word day in Genesis?
It's A, B, or C?
No, A or B. In other words, what is the bigger problem in the church? Is it the evolution-creation debate, or the age issue concerning the word day?
It's the age issue.
You're exactly right. Let me read just a couple quickly of statistics. I believe this was a 2011 survey of 1,000 Protestant pastors.
Okay.
I believe God used evolution to create people. 64% strongly disagree. The majority of pastors do not believe that. In other words, they believe that God created everything that we see. However, the other 36%. I believe the earth is approximately 6,000 years old. A majority of pastors disagree. They believe in old earth millions and billions of years.
Okay.
Why?
Yeah, why?
That's a major question, you know, and I've wrestled with that. I've thought about that. And I think, from my perspective, Perry, I think there's two reasons. First of all, if Satan can get the church to start to disagree on basic fundamental issues of the Bible, he's already created a wedge. Mm-hmm. And that's what we started with this morning. Does the Bible mean what it says? Simplicity, clarity. Does it mean that? And then secondly, it allows science to start to wedge its way into the Bible. Those two major reasons. First of all, you have people starting to argue within the church. You know, it's just like, when is Christ going to come back? The rapture. You know, is that an issue of divisiveness in the church?
Can we change the subject now?
Yeah, can we? But does it have to be a decisive issue? I mean, does it really make any difference whether he comes before, during, or after the tribulation? No, the fact is, he's coming. Right. And we can rest in that promise, correct?
Right.
So when we get to Genesis, and then when it says the word day, then some people say, no, John, Perry, that's not what it means. Let me tell you what it means. Let me modify a few words and let's redefine what that means. Well, if I can do that, then can I do that in other portions of Scripture?
Yeah.
See, and we talked about that the last time we were together.
Right.
We talked about the clarity of Scripture, that in Deuteronomy 6, it talks about that the men were given a charge while they were in the Sinai desert to teach the Scriptures to their children. That's Deuteronomy 6:7. Well, if it's simple enough to teach to their children, it has to be simple enough for us to understand. Correct? So it's really kind of a simplistic issue. But let me give you a little bit of history. And I wrote this down because I thought it was fascinating that how we got into this mess to begin with. Prior to the 18th century, the issue of creation being accomplished in 6 24-hour days was not an issue. Prior to the 18th century. Nobody really challenged that.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm thinking out loud, but go ahead.
Well, generally speaking.
Okay.
Generally speaking. However, during the 18th century, evolutionary and naturalistic theories of the Earth's creation based on uniformitarian, and that means what we see today happened yesterday, which is an assumption, and old Earth theories emerged in addition to two Enlightenment-generated philosophical movements. Now see if this sounds familiar. Atheism and deism. Sound familiar? That started in the 18th century, which elevated human reason to a place of supreme authority and took an anti-supernaturalistic view of the Bible, holding it just to be another human book. And then in the 1800s, a gentleman by the name of Lyell came out with a geology textbook that talked about the layers of the earth and millions and billions of years and all of this stuff. And basically all of that formed the framework for the old age theory, which Darwin got a hold of when he went on his boat trip, and then in 1859 published Origin of the Species. And all of that gave him the perfect mechanism to be able to explain how evolution worked through long periods of time. Interesting, right? So, the question is, as we talked about, when you say the word day in the Bible, does it mean 24-hour day, approximately, or does it mean millions and billions of years? And the last time we were together, I talked about that long periods of time, basically what people do is they go in between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, and they say, well, what we do is we retranslate a few words, and then what we can do is we can slide science and long ages of time into the creation account. And that's how I explain all these rock layers and these humanoid fossils and all of that stuff. But the problem is that's not what Genesis says.
Okay.
And we talked a little bit about biologos and reasons to believe, Dr. Hugh Ross, and biologos and fact. And these will be on the screen. If anybody is really interested in this issue, this book, Creation and Time, goes down Dr. Hugh Ross's reasons to believe, point by point by point, and then takes you to the Bible and tells you exactly what the Bible says, if anybody is interested in that. Secondly, one of the best books that I have found on the whole subject of what we're discussing, the inerrancy of Genesis, is found by Dr. Sephardi and called Refuting Compromise. And it's not technical. It goes into the Hebrew, tells you exactly what the Hebrew says. They're just great resources if somebody wants to research this. Also, we're going to be talking about this again on September 22nd, in a couple of weeks. And at that time, I'm going to have the notes that we're basing this series off of available in a little bit longer version. The notes already are up to about 10 or 11 pages.
Right.
So there's a lot more information in the notes than what we're going to be discussing this morning.
Great.
So in the past, we've talked about where the old versions of the word day, which is yom, in Genesis comes from. And a lot of people will point to 2 Peter and they say, well, you know, John, in 2 Peter it says,
a day is a thousand
years.
years.
1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. And that is very, very common. But that's not what that verse is referring to. It does not say a day is. It says is like. And basically what it's saying is that to God, time really is not an issue. It has nothing to do, if you go to a Hebrew lexicon, it has nothing to do with long periods of time or Genesis whatsoever. So what I want to focus on this morning in our time together is the 24-hour day. Does Genesis really say what the word day really means?
All right, now this is going to lead us to when he divided the night from the light.
No.
From the day?
No, we're saving that for later.
Oh, wow.
See, no, you're ahead of the curve here.
Okay.
You're ahead of the curve.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, let's just focus on the word day.
That's the first time I've ever been accused of that.
Okay, let me go over this just kind of slow, and I want to base what I'm going to say on two Greek words, bara and ex nihilo. And you and I have talked about this, some months ago, that when you go through the Genesis account, and you're talking about God creating everything that we see in 6 days. There's two words that are used quite frequently. Ex nihilo, which means out of nothing. God created everything that we see today out of nothing. You can find that in Hebrews 11:3. But another word that's very interesting there is the Hebrew word bara. And what that means is that when God created it, it happened. In other words, it's finished. So when I create the earth, it happens. When I create light, it happens. When I create the seas and when I create land, it happens. I don't create it and a million years later, oh, it finally happens. Bara means I said it, it happens. It's like when you say the word word, how long does it take you to say that?
Yeah.
A split second?
Yeah.
It's done, it's finished, correct? It's the same way. The Hebrew is really interesting. It's a lot more explanatory than English.
All right, let's come to Genesis, because when you're dealing with two other Hebrew words determining when God said something, it happened.
Bara. And then of course ex nihilo means he created something out of nothing, which also, by the way, refutes evolution. Evolution means things that we see today happened over long periods of time, slowly and gradually. But ex nihilo says, no, God created everything. This is Hebrews 11:3. Says, everything that we see, he created out of things that are unseen. In other words, things that we don't see. So he created it out of nothing. And secondly, bara, he created it. When he created it, it happened. It's finished. It didn't take long periods of time for it to happen. So when you read the Hebrew, it becomes very explicit what Genesis is saying. Now, let me present my case.
Yes.
Okay. The word day in Genesis, which is yom, Y-O-M, can mean a period of a year, a general or vague concept of time, a period of light in a day-night cycle, a specific point of time, or a period of 24 hours. However,
it can mean all those things.
Could mean all of those things. However, when yom is used with any one of these three things, preceded by a numeric, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, if it's associated with evening and morning, or if it's associated with night, it always means 24 hours. And in the Genesis account, how many of those three things do you think it's associated with?
Probably all of them.
Just say all three.
Yeah.
You're right. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
All three things is exactly right. I think one of the clearest examples of the use of the word yom is found in the fourth commandment, both in Exodus 20 and 31, which is the Ten Commandments, right? And this is what it says. This is the fourth commandment. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. And you've heard that verse before. And this is what it means in Hebrew. The word for, that's the way the verse starts out. Let me see, for in 6 days. And in Hebrew, this is what that means. The word for, also having the sense because, or you could read that verse as because in 6 days, okay? At the beginning of the expression is a causal explanation showing that the creation week is the very basis of the working week. And pastors will willingly point to that as our model, our template for our working week. We work 6 days and we rest
7.
The seventh day, or 1 day. Now, if the word day is under contention in Genesis, in the first part of Genesis, why isn't the word day in this under contention? Because this is telling us that 6 days we work, 1 day that we rest. So if you're going to tell me that day can mean millions and billions of years, then does that mean on the seventh day we're supposed to rest millions and billions of years?
Or this life you work and then you rest when you get to heaven.
Do you see the dichotomy and the lack of consistency here? Yeah, it's the same word. I thought you would find this very interesting. I want to give you some quotes, and I think, and in these notes, I've given a lot more examples from the Hebrew than we're going to have time to talk about, but I want to read you some quotes because I think if there's a final nail in the coffin of what day means, these will help to settle that. This comes from James Barr, who is the past Regius Professor of Hebrew at Oxford University. Quote, "Probably so far as I know, there is no professor of Hebrew or Old Testament at any world-class university who does not believe that the writer or writers of Genesis 1 through 11 intended to convey to their readers that creation took place in a series of 6 days, which were the same as the days of 24 hours we now experience, and Noah's flood was understood to be worldwide." Any questions?
Wow.
Oh, but I've got more.
Oh, but there are those who disagree with them.
That's okay, but they're not Hebrew experts.
Yeah, okay.
Well, this gets better, Perry. This comes from the current Regius Professor of Hebrew at Oxford University. It's almost exactly the same. I have not met any Hebrew professors who had the slightest doubt about this, and that's what we're talking about, unless they were already committed to some alternative by other considerations that do not arise from a straightforward reading of the Hebrew text as it stands. There's your two top Hebrew experts in the world telling you that to them, they don't know of any Hebrew scholar that does not believe what Genesis says, 24-hour day. Next quote. For the biblical people, this was history, difficult as it is for us to accept this view. That's Emmanuel Tove. He's the Magnus Professor of Bible, Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And I mean, we could go on. We could go on this morning, and I could keep quoting different people, that people who are Hebrew scholars, when they read the Hebrew in the Genesis text, it's very clear to them that Genesis says 24-hour day. Here's another quote that is one of my favorite that I use in classes. This comes from evolutionist. He's not a creationist.
Okay.
John Eddy, one of the world's leading astronomers. There isn't much in the way of observational evidence in astronomy to conflict with a very young age for the sun and the earth, less than 7,000 years. One of the top solar astronomers in the world today. He's an evolutionist, and he says to me, he says the universe is not much older than 7,000 years, which completely refutes evolution, because evolution needs millions and billions of years to happen. Interesting.
I could be an evolutionist and say that.
He said that at a conference, and when he said it, I guess there was thousands of mouths that hit the floor, and he was all of a sudden very unpopular in the evolutionary community.
Okay.
In the evolutionary community. Let me just very quick read you one more thing, and this is one of the things that I have in the notes. What I have listed as 3 additional side points of interest, and this is a good one. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. That's Genesis 1:5. And this verse begins the cycle of the day. With the creation of light, this is right out of the Hebrew, Perry. With the creation of light, it is now possible to have a cycle of light and darkness, which God labels day and night. Evening is the transition from light day to darkness night. Morning is the transition from darkness night to light day. Having an evening and a morning amounts to having one full day. Agreed? Okay. Hence, the following equation is what Genesis 1:5 expresses. Evening plus morning equals 1 24-hour day. Therefore, by using a most unusual grammatical construction, Genesis 1 is defining what a day is. Clear?
Yep.
Pretty clear.
Well, I think what's so interesting to me is that there would be such an effort to defute the 24-hour day. I'm trying to think what the purpose of that would be, other than science and the ability to
divide.
To divide what you, or read into the Bible what you want it to say.
Right, division. I think one of Satan's most usable tools in the church is to create division, whether it's the rapture. And I mean, we could talk about a host of different things this morning, and but Genesis is a popular one because secular science, to a degree, backs this up. That when you turn on the History Channel, the Discovery Channel, when you walk into Barnes & Noble and you see Scientific American, you see National Geographic, you see all these magazines, what are you constantly bombarded with? Millions and billions of years. And if you keep hearing that, you keep hearing that, and you keep hearing that, pretty soon you start to think, well, science has proven that the universe is 14.5 billion years old, and the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old, and man has only been around for about 100,000 years. But is that true? No, that's not true. Science has not proven that. But when you continually hear that, then it's easy to start thinking, well, you know, I mean, the Bible, you know, it's just a book, and so science really has made a lot of advances. I mean, we've put a man on the moon. Now you can replace a shoulder, a hip, a knee, and you know, and all this stuff. And so, for all of the good that science has done, and I don't mean science is bad. Science can be very, very good. But I think the foundational question is what reigns supreme? is it scripture, sola scriptura, or is it science, and do you elevate science over the Bible?
If you do, then there is no God.
Then there is no God. And that's what I was just talking about, that prior to the 18th century, this was not really a focal point within the church. But then the 18th century, once we started to get deism and all these, and I'm going to say the wider thinking, and then we started to introduce more science, and then slowly but surely science was elevated to a place where it superseded the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Wow, fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Again, we're talking, these notes will be available after our next time together, so towards the end of the month.
That'll be the 22nd, yeah.
We'll have the end. All right, so the 24-hour period, the day being a 24-hour period, that also pays tribute to the fact that what you said earlier in those Hebrew words, when God spoke, it happened.
Right.
So
that was bara.
Why can't it happen in 24 hours? I mean, if you can take something, make something out of nothing and have it instantly there, then the 24-hour period certainly is viable.
Look at it this way, Perry. When you look at the universe and everything that is in it, God created it, and He created it instantaneously. But if I take a step backwards, if God created it, does He have the power to create it instantaneously, or does He have the power to create it any way He wants to? Absolutely yes. Mm-hmm. So He could have created instantaneously. Now, if God created everything in 6 days and 24 hours, what are the ramifications of that to evolution?
Well, it's a stake in the heart.
Let me read you three things.
Yeah.
The long periods of time that evolution requires do not fit within the 6-day creation account. So what we're talking about is 6 days or 14.5 billion years. Right. They don't fit. Number two, the evolutionary process within the 6-day creation week is also not possible. Mm-hmm. And number three, there is no room for evolution anywhere in the biblical account of creation. Let me read that again. There is no room for evolution anywhere in the biblical account of creation.
Wow.
Nowhere.
Nowhere.
Nowhere. Creation was purely from God. It was a one-time miraculous event. Evolution is a scientific event that requires time, requires repetition, requires verification. You cannot repeat creation.
Wow. John, fascinating. Thank you. Again, these notes will be available after the 22nd of September.
September, right.
Thanks, bud. See you next time.
You bet. Thank you, Perry.